fate has ever been a merciless architect. No matter how fiercely its chosen struggle, no matter how far they rise or how brightly they burn, destiny waits with patient hands. So it was with the Blood Angels. From the moment of their creation, they fought not only the enemies of mankind, but the shadow written into their own blood. They resisted the role the Emperor had carved for them, dared to believe they could become something greater than the violence of their origins. From the worst fragments of humanity, they forged something radiant. They lifted themselves above the filth and despair that birthed them and stood before the fledgling Imperium as living symbols of hope, guardian angels clad in ceramite and fire. Yet, within those triumphs lay the seeds of tragedy. Their beauty, their nobility, and their devotion stirred envy in the heart of Horus, the war master who would one day betray everything he once claimed to love. When the Horus heresy erupted, the Blood Angels were struck to the core. The opening blows of that civil war shattered them, testing their resolve beyond all measure. And yet, true to their nature, they did not surrender to despair. Time and again, they rose from devastation, refusing to yield to darkness, even as it gnawed at their souls. What future might have awaited Sanguinius and his sons had fate not intervened with treachery and blood? What noble legacy might have bloomed from their suffering? That answer was stolen by the heresy itself, leaving the Blood Angels to endure the slow decay of their lineage with unyielding pride, the last inheritance of their fallen angel. The Unification Wars are remembered as a time of legend, when the Emperor's newborn Space Marine legions swept across Terra, crushing any and all opposition. Yet amid these tales of conquest, the Ninth Legion is conspicuously absent. Where other proto-legions earned glory in Albia, Indonesia, and Frank, alongside the Thunder Warriors, the Ninth Legion fought in silence, consigned to a role as necessary as it was abhorrent. The early Blood Angels were not conquerors as their brother legions were. They were a weapon unleashed where conquest was impossible. They were sent into the poisoned wastelands of Old Night, regions scarred by radiation storms, chemical plagues, and genetic ruin. Places abandoned by history and forgotten by hope. There, amidst mutant tribes and twisted remnants of humanity, the Ninth Legion held the line alone, while the Emperor drove his grand victories elsewhere. This fate was no accident. Each legion was shaped for a purpose, and the Ninth Legion was designed to endure horrors that would break others. While most legions recruited champions and princes from conquered nations, the Ninth cast their net among the dispossessed and the damned. They took in entire tribes of wasteland survivors, mutants, prisoners, and broken souls, and remade them into angels of war. Scarred by generations of radiation and poison, these recruits were scarcely human. Yet through the agonizing transformation of Astartes' ascension, those who survived emerged tall pale and eerily beautiful, their features carved into stern perfection. The genetic legacy of their unknown Primarch favored the broken, though the process was so brutal that few endured it. To sustain their numbers, the apothecaries of the Ninth worked without rest, carving life from death in the most hellish war zones imaginable. Their legion grew, even as whispers followed in their wake. For the Emperor had gifted them with a darker ability, the implanted homophagia organ, allowing them to consume the flesh of fallen foes and steal their knowledge and skills. Thus they earned a dreadful name among the Emperor's mortal armies, the Eaters of the Dead. Across the battlefields of Terra, blood-smeared angels stalked the fallen long after the fighting ceased. Few understood the purpose behind this ritual. In the isolated hellscapes where they fought alone, this grim trait granted vital intelligence and transformed raw recruits into seasoned warriors. Yet, the reputation clung to them like a curse. Created to fight monsters, the Ninth risked becoming something monstrous themselves. As the Unification Wars gave way to the Great Crusade and spread beyond Terra and into the Sol System, the Ninth Legion marched onward. Despite their numbers, they were denied glory in the early conquests of Jupiter or the inner worlds. Instead, they were sent to Neptune's artificial moons, dark labyrinths infested with Xenos raiders and genetically debased colonists. There was no reward here, only delay. The Emperor needed time to secure Saturn's shipyards and Mars's allegiance. The Ninth Legion was sent to hold the line, and if necessary, die. 12,000 warriors vanished into the shadowed tunnels of Neptune. No word reached the Imperium for years. When the Emperor finally returned, few expected survivors. Instead, they found the Ninth Legion still standing, bloodied and diminished, yet renewed. Their numbers had been replenished from Neptune's barely human population. Where others would have perished, the Ninth endured, rising again like a blood-soaked phoenix. They became a legion defined by relentless close-quarters assault, favoring overwhelming charges over drawn-out wars. They embraced their legend, striking at dawn and dusk, adorning their storm-gray armor with symbols of death, often fighting bareheaded so their angelic, blood-streaked faces might shatter enemy morale. Some companies wove their rituals directly into their tactics, tearing enemies apart and feasting upon the dead to spread terror through opposing ranks. Again and again, the Ninth Legion was cast into battles meant to destroy them, and each time, they emerged stronger, changed but unbroken. In the silent reaches of the Cooper Belt and the poisoned wastes of Rust, they fought unseen wars that made the Great Crusade possible. Malcador the Sigillite himself took notice and named them the Revenant Legion, warriors who refused to die. They were feared, misunderstood, and deliberately hidden away, an unsightly weapon to be drawn only in moments of desperation. Yet alongside other neglected legions, They laid the foundations of the Imperium. Their deeds went unsung, and their sacrifices uncelebrated. But without them, the golden empire the Emperor dreamed of would never have been born. And so, again and again, the banners of the Ninth were cast down upon the battlefield. Their warriors fell in numbers that would have broken lesser forces, and yet, strangely, the same names continued to appear in the Legion's rolls of honor. To later historians and remembrancers, this seemed evidence of a long line of peerless heroes, champions whose deeds endured across generations, woven together in a single epic myth. But the truth was far darker. From its earliest days, the Ninth Legion had been forced to survive in conditions beyond endurance, cut off, outnumbered, and deprived of reinforcement. And thus, they adopted practices born not of cruelty, but of necessity. Among these was a ritual seen as both practical and horrifying. The fallen leaders of the Ninth Legion were consumed by their followers, so that their experience, skill, and hard-won knowledge would not be lost. This act was not desecration in the eyes of the Ninth. It was reverence. Through the homophagia implanted within their body, the Legionnaires absorbed the memories and instincts of those they consumed. Over time, this evolved into an accepted tradition. Recruits would take the names of those whose skills they inherited. Lieutenants assumed the titles of fallen captains. To outsiders, whose eyes only saw identical angelic warriors in storm gray armor, this quiet continuity went unnoticed. Thus was born the illusion of immortality. The most famous of these names was Isildur Ossuros, believed by imperial records to have commanded the Ninth Legion from Unity until the discovery of Baal in 843 M30. In truth, that name died many times, reborn again and again as successors took up both the mantle and the memory of those who had come before. This tradition bound the Legion together across origins and generations, but it also set them apart. To the Imperial Army and the other legions, the practices of the Ninth were deeply unsettling. Even before Sanguinius was found, several Primarchs expressed open distaste for the Legion's customs, though none could deny their effectiveness in war. Such was the price of survival for the immortal Ninth. In the early years of the Great Crusade, as Imperial fleets pushed beyond the Segmentum Solar into the lawless depths of wilderness space, the Emperor's armies encountered horrors that shattered mortal sanity. Among these accursed battlefields, few were as loathed as the world later known as Kyberin. 4 full regiments of the Veridin regulars vanished upon that irradiated sphere, leaving a gaping weakness in the Crusade's advance. In response, the Emperor unleashed the Ninth Legion. 3 companies descended upon Kyberin, a wasteland of poisoned sands ruled by the techno-barbarian warlord Eclobia. The world's economy was built on ritual slaughter and cannibalism. Mutant chattel tribes served both as soldiers and sustenance, and it was these hordes that had nearly annihilated the stranded Imperial army. For 3 months, the Veridans had held their trenches against waves of barely human attackers. Then the storm gray drop pods of the 9th Legion fell from the sky. They broke the mutant tide with brutal efficiency and seized the northern mountains, scattering the tribes with uncompromising force. For months, resistance was scattered until Eclobia took notice. When the warlord's full strength was unleashed, the Legion was nearly overwhelmed. Mutants, by the tens of thousands, surged forward, their warped bodies strong enough to tear Ceramite apart. The ground shook beneath their advance. The 9th formed a spearhead and drove toward Eclopia's banner poles until reality itself tore open. Warp-born horrors erupted from the enslaved sorcerers of the Cracked Skull. The battlefield became a charnel storm, slaughtering legionary and mutant alike. Facing annihilation, the 9th did what others would not. They withdrew. Not in panic, but with ruthless pragmatism, hacking a path through the horde with broken blades, shattered armor, and their own blood. Nearly 2 full companies were lost. Fewer than 400 legionaries remained. Cut off from the Imperium, they reorganized for survival. The Apothecarian became the Legion's beating heart. Squad-level shock assaults replaced mass engagements. Raids turned from annihilation to domination. Those who could serve were enslaved. Those who could not were consumed. The Legion adopted cannibalism openly, feeding upon the war dead to sustain themselves and deny their enemy the same. Children of irradiated mutants were bred and implanted with geneseed, were forged into Astartes by a process no other legion could have survived. For 12 Terran years, the war ground on. Piece by piece, Eclobia's power collapsed. When the final confrontation came, the 9th had rebuilt itself into nearly 1,000 warriors. Eclobia's sorcerers were slain, his fortress broken. His attempted escape ended beneath the guns of Imperial cruisers bearing the heraldry of the 7th Legion. Rogel Dorn arrived to find not a compliant world, but a nightmare of survival. He ordered Kyberin razed, its sins erased before remembrancers could bear witness. The name Charnel Feast spread among the soldiery, then was deliberately silenced. Victory after victory only deepened the Legion's infamy. They became specters haunting the edges of the crusade, blood-soaked angels who left no survivors, no mercy. Without a Primarch to guide them, the 9th Legion drifted into isolation. Crimson cults formed within its ranks. Bloody prophets rose. Ritual and doctrine bled together until distinction vanished. Some worlds welcomed them as gods. Others feared them as devils. Broken apart by necessity, denied proper supply, the 9th became outcasts. They fought in small, isolated companies, relying on jump troops and line infantry, not by choice, but because the Imperium no longer trusted them with greater arms. They stood upon a knife's edge, useful but dangerous, and a reckoning loomed. Until, that is, the Great Crusade came to Baal Secundus, When the Primarchs were stolen through the warp, none were spared corruption. The capsule of Sanguinius came to rest upon Baal Secundus, a moon reduced to ash and radiation by old night. Discovered by the tribes of the blood, his wings nearly sealed his fate, but compassion stayed their hands. He grew swiftly, stronger than any among them, walking unshielded through lethal deserts, slaying beasts with bare hands. When rage took him, light crowned his brow. He became protector, teacher, and symbol, never conquering, only guiding. And under his presence, humanity on Baal Secundus endured. In 843 M30, the Emperor came to Baal. He found in his son not a warlord, but an unwilling god. Sanguinius knelt and asked only for mercy for his people. The Emperor granted it. Baal would be spared the imperial truth. No fleet would return without Sanguinius's leave. And so the great angel departed, toward a legion on the brink of damnation. In the first years after his rediscovery, the Emperor placed Sanguinius beside Horus himself, letting the great angel learn how war was truly waged among the stars, how expeditionary fleets moved, how compliance was enforced, how the newborn Imperium functioned as a machine of conquest and governance. And in that time, Sanguinius and Horus forged something rare among their kind, a bond of trust, mentor to pupil, brother to brother. Only then was the Ninth Legion finally summoned to stand before the Master who had always been theirs. They were scattered across the galaxy, flung into distant war zones in small isolated bands. Recalling them was not a simple order. It became a hunt through the sprawl of the crusade itself. It took many solar months just to locate and redirect the farthest companies, and in the end, it would be 2 standard years and 4 solar months before the gathering was complete. When at last they assembled, it was on Tekar, a world lashed by storms, rain and thunder rolling over a landscape that seemed to snarl at the sky. There, on the storm-racked soil of that far system, an army of grim killers with the faces of angels stood waiting, eager for whatever slaughter might come next. They were the Revenant Legion, the Great Crusade's blood-soaked specters, captains and cohorts hardened in rad wastes and void wars, men who had been given scorn where others received praise. And then, from orbit, storm birds descended, marked with the sigils of the Luna Wolves. The captains of the Ninth gathered as the transports touched down in the howling rain. Warriors in white armor emerged, sons of Horus, disciplined and renowned. But the figure at their head was not Horus. He was taller than any warrior there, unmistakably a Primarch by mere presence alone. And when the stormlight flashed, great white wings unfurled. Sanguinius stepped forward, and the Legion saw themselves in him. The same sculpted elegance, the same impossible perfection, yet tempered by something they had not expected. His gaze moved across their ranks and did not flinch from what he saw. These were warriors marked by unrelenting battle, scarred on the face, and more dangerously, on the spirit. They were not a legion to be won by ceremony, not a brotherhood to be impressed by escort and heraldry. So, Sanguinius did something no one there anticipated. In the rain and thunder of Tegar, before those rough-cast killers and scarred blood drinkers, the great angel knelt. He did not demand their loyalty. He offered them his own. For warriors who had given everything to the Imperium and received only mistrust in return, a Primarch's allegiance, freely given without reservation, was a weapon sharper than any blade. In that instant, Sanguinius earned what no decree could command. But he did not leave devotion to words alone. To seal the pact, he led them into battle. The stage was Tekhar Pentaris, the storm-racked fifth world of the Tekhar system. There, Sanguinius fought at the forefront of the Legion's first campaign at his side. He shed blood in the maelstrom. He learned the truth of his sons, not from reports or remembrancers, but from the way they moved through war. He saw the hunger in them, wild and aching, threaded through the Legion like a living thing. And with a chill of recognition, he understood it was not merely theirs. It was his. The abhuman hordes of Tegar and their bestial thralls were cut down by the Ninth like wheat before a scythe. And in that violence, Sanguinius himself claimed a trophy. The pelt of a dire Carnodon, taken as both proof of victory and a symbol of the pact he had forged with his gene sons. Yet, in the gore-strewn silence after the fighting, Sanguinius saw a future that could have been. A crimson horizon of endless war, where his legion's hunger would not be chained, where the sons of the Ninth would become true monsters, slaves to a fury that would devour them from within. And still, he did not despair. Because even in the heat of their bloodlust, he found something else, buried but present, a spark of nobility, the still warm ashes of martial pride and iron determination. They fought not only for slaughter, but for victory's favor, and in their own brutal way, they clung to codes of honor with stubborn will. Those sparks would be his tools. Sanguinius understood that no fate, no vision was absolute, no darkness beyond repair. And when the Tekhar campaign ended, he spoke the words that would redefine them. Even though a darkness hangs over them, a future soaked in blood and horror, they are angels yet. Angels of blood. On Tekhar, the Revenant Legion was reborn, and the Ninth Legion took the name that would echo through history: the Blood Angels. The Blood Angels did not return as one great host to Baal. That blistering wasteland had little left to teach them. They had already learned ruin on Terra, and on 1,000 dead worlds besides. Instead, Sanguinius turned to the brother who had guided him at the beginning, Horus, mentor, friend, and the one Primarch to whom he was closest. The Legion was divided, and its heraldry changed to honor their winged sire and the new name they had earned. company by company, the Blood Angels were set alongside companies of the Luna Wolves, fighting in their shadow for the next solar decade. They saw the fall of countless worlds. They prosecuted campaigns of every kind, from extermination wars of blunt brutality to subtle operations of strike and fade. And under the keen insight of two Primarchs, each campaign became a trial, not merely of strength, but of discipline. Sanguinius reshaped their pride, not pride in carnage, pride in becoming exemplars, worthy of the Imperium's creed, equal even to Horus's own. They learned brotherhood in the year-long siege of Anaxis 12, standing beside the Imperial fists against a tide of Harad that seemed without end. They learned discipline on Cambriol and Prehold, matching blades with the inscrutable Eldari Reavers. And on Kentaris Beta, they learned mercy, following Sanguinius in the bloodless pacification of the Kentaran colonies. With every victory, the old stigma loosened. The Legion worked hard to shed its gore-soaked solitude. Fury was tempered with wisdom. Hunger was chained with discipline. And when at last they came to Baal, they were no longer the rough beasts that had stalked Terra's poisoned regions. They arrived as a Legion remade. There, on Baal's sands, they met newly raised contingents, Astartes drawn from the blood, the native people of the rad-scoured system, whom Sanguinius had raised and schooled in war. The Legion was joined in full at last. Terran-born and Baal-born warriors spread across the companies. Each half meant to strengthen the other, and to weaken the grip of the 9th Legion's darkest Terran inheritance. But the hunger did not vanish entirely. It remained like a shackled beast at the edge of madness, always waiting. But under Sanguinius, they learned to keep those chains tight. They devoted themselves not only to war, but to wisdom. They became scholars as well as warriors. And as their new reputation spread, the old stories of corpse eaters and crimson cults faded into half-remembered nightmares. Those who succumbed to the thirst or to the black fury stalking behind it were quietly concealed, granted the Emperor's peace, or sealed away on Baal. The Blood Angels took their place in the Great Crusade as equals, crimson-clad, disciplined, and terrible, still masters of shock assault, still the storm from the sky, but now wielding the full arsenal of the Imperium with a Primarch's will behind every blow. And when they descended, it was like firefall, a rain of burning lights against the dawn, the wrath of the Emperor given crimson form. They remained rivals of the equally assault-driven World Eaters, yet they were never as ferocious, because Sanguinius's wisdom restrained what would otherwise have consumed them. Of all the Primarchs, Sanguinius formed the closest bonds with Horus, Leman Russ, and Jagatai Khan. Even early in his legend, he was widely thought the noblest of his brothers, and was often deep in the Emperor's council. Even Horus sensed something in him, an untainted purity of spirit, a closeness to their father that Horus could never truly match. Where many fought for the joy of battle, Sanguinius fought for what would come after, a golden era of peace and prosperity, humanity united. But this era was not to be. The Great Crusade ended not with triumph, but with betrayal. Horus, the greatest of the Emperor's sons, fell to the promises of the Chaos Gods. He sought to turn his brothers to his cause, but he knew Sanguinius would never willingly betray their father. So Horus devised a plan to either corrupt the Blood Angels or destroy them. Horus held a secret. Decades earlier, during a genocidal campaign on Melchior, Horus had found Sanguinius in the sunken ruin of an alien chapel and witnessed the unthinkable. Sanguinius killing one of his own Astartes. Confronted, Sanguinius revealed the truth. There was a trait buried within his genome, a flaw waiting to awaken. It would later be known as the Red Thirst. Sanguinius had known of this flaw for years, keeping it hidden from the Emperor and his brothers. Only a handful within the Legion knew the full extent. They named it simply the flaw, and they searched for a cure. Horus swore he would never speak of it, even to their own father. He vowed to help Sanguinius, however long it took. And for a time, he kept that promise. Then, corrupted, Horus used it as a blade. In his authority as War Master, Horus ordered Sanguinius to gather his legion and go to the Cygnus Cluster, a triple star system in the Ultima Segmentum, near the eastern fringe. The Blood Angels were to cleanse 7 worlds and 15 moons of Xenos invaders called the Nephilim and free the humans there. This would come to be known as the Cygnus Campaign. To tempt Sanguinius further, Horus claimed he had found a means to purge the Blood Angels of the flaw and escape from the darkness within their souls. If Sanguinius obeyed, Horus promised freedom. Sanguinius had no reason to doubt his closest of friends. Their bond was legendary, so close it had stirred jealousy among their brothers. And so Sanguinius obeyed, and in doing so, walked into a trap. The Cygnus Cluster had already fallen to the ruinous powers, warped into a realm of chaos within real space, ruled by a greater demon of Slanesh, Kyrus the Perverse. When the Blood Angels arrived, demonic forces ambushed their fleet, crippling or killing many of their navigators and astropaths. For the first time, the Blood Angels faced the true fury of chaos. Kyrus sent an image of himself to Sanguinius, proclaiming dominion over the system in Slanesh's name, and taunting the angel into taking it back. The Blood Angels prepared their counterattack and struck Cygnus Prime, the seeds of Kyrus' power. In that campaign, Sanguinius confronted another horror, Karbonda, a greater demon of Khorne. They battled, and Sanguinius was grievously wounded, temporarily incapacitated. In that moment, he witnessed Karbonda slaughter 500 of his sons with a single blow. The psychic shock of so many deaths slammed into Sanguinius' mind and cast him into unconsciousness. With their Primarch fallen and their brothers butchered, the Legion snapped. A dark rage consumed the Blood Angels. They surged into berserk fury and smashed the demon horde apart, driven by a thirst for violence that would not be subsided until every trace of chaos had been torn from the world. At that same time, the Blood Angels' librarians violated the edicts of Nicaea, using their powers to heal and revive their Primarch. When Sanguinius rose again, he assaulted Karbonda and defeated the Bloodthirster. Even Kyrus was banished back into the Immaterium by the Angel's own hand. Only when Cygnus Prime was fully cleansed did the rage finally fade. Victory was real, but something had been awakened. The Berserker madness left a brooding shadow upon the Legion's soul, one that would continue to manifest over the years to come and would culminate as a terrible curse when the Legion was dealt the most devastating blow it could endure upon Terra. This growing shadow to be punctuated by the death of their Primarch, and would later become known as the Black Rage, haunting not only the Blood Angels, but their successors as well. If the Great Crusade was humanity's brightest blaze, the Horus Heresy was the smoke-choked night that followed. Brother turning on brother, mercy vanished, whole worlds were put to the torch, and the Emperor's dream of a united, peaceful Imperium cracked under the weight of civil war. Yet in that ruin, the Blood Angels did not waver. They held to Terra's banner and stood fast at the Emperor's side. With Horus gone over to treachery, a void opened in the Loyalist command, one Sanguinius stepped into without hesitation. The Great Angel assumed responsibility for coordinating the Emperor's faithful hosts, and in doing so, he pushed the Blood Angels into the brutal front line of the conflict. Old rivalries curdled into hatred, none more so than the Blood Angels' long-standing competition with the World Eaters, a rivalry that became open enmity once the legions served different masters. Their clashes were among the most vicious of an already merciless war. And always, the shadow of Horus loomed. It was said he feared Sanguinius more than any of his brothers, hated him too, and spun stratagems meant to trap or kill the angel outright. But again and again those snares failed to close. Despite the Emperor's might, despite the fury and brilliance of the Loyalist Primarchs, Horus's armies drove forward like a storm tide. The war came to the cradle of mankind faster than anyone wished to believe possible. Soon, the Emperor was besieged within the walls of the Imperial Palace itself, and the Blood Angels were there. When the siege of Terra began, the defenders of the palace were spearheaded by 3 legions: the Blood Angels, the Imperial Fists, and the White Scars. Together, they clung to the palace like iron nails driven into bedrock. Sanguinius took personal command of the defense of the outer walls, where the fighting was thickest. The angel was seen, wings spread, blade bright, holding the line. 3 times the War Master's forces clawed footholds onto the walls. 3 times Sanguinius and the Blood Angels threw them back. But even angels cannot hold a crumbling wall forever. When Chaos Titans finally broke the walls, Sanguinius orchestrated the retreat into the inner palace. And when the defenders reached the Eternity Gate, the threshold of the Emperor's sanctum, Sanguinius turned and made his stand, refusing to yield until the loyalist wounded were carried inside. Only when the last of them had been brought through did he pivot to follow. That was when the trap was sprung. Before the Eternity Gate could seal, Ka-Banda, archdemon of Khorne, lord of all the bloodthirsters, struck at the angel. They met in mid-air above the palace, a duel of wings and rage, and Sanguinius, exhausted and caught by surprise, was hurled down. Ka-Banda hovered over him, laughing, certain the deed was done. But Sanguinius lived. He gathered himself, rose again, and launched upward like a missile. He seized the demon by the ankle, hauled the monster higher and higher, and before Ka-Banda could roar its fury, Sanguinius broke the bloodthirster's back across his knee, then hurled the shattered carcass down into the chaos host below. The enemy howled, and the Eternity Gate closed. Even with terror burning, time was running out for Horus. The Loyalists knew that relief was closing in. The Space Wolves, Dark Angels, and Ultramarines were nearing Terra, and their arrival would force Horus to gamble. So he made a choice of desperation and arrogance. He lowered the void shields around his battle barge, the Vengeful Spirit, daring the Emperor to come to him and settle the war in a single stroke. The Emperor accepted. A teleport strike was assembled. The Emperor, Sanguinius, Rogel Dorn, and the warriors of the Legio Custodes. They launched themselves into the heart of the enemy flagship, and the ship's warped sorcery answered. The teleports scattered the Loyalist assault force across the demon-haunted vessel. Sanguinius was separated from his comrades, and legend holds that through trickery and manipulation, he was guided toward the War Master himself. And Sanguinius, gifted with foresight, always knew of the certainty that awaited him here. Whether it was loyalty or grim acceptance that carried him onward, the Blood Angels have never doubted the answer. At last, the two Primarchs faced one another on the command deck, the angel and the traitor, who had once been his closest brother. Horus offered Sanguinius power, a place at his side, if only he would renounce the Emperor. Sanguinius refused, and so Horus attacked. Even at his strongest, Sanguinius could not have expected to defeat what Horus had become, bloated with unnatural might, saturated in the patronage of Chaos Undivided. Sanguinius was already worn and wounded from Terra's defense, yet still he fought. He matched Horus's martial skill with impossible resolve, blade answering claw, refusing to fall quickly, refusing to make it easy. In the end, Horus did not finish the angel by steel alone. He turned to psychic torment. And in his malice, the War Master made Sanguinius's death as vile and agonizing as the horror serving him could devise. The psychic violence of that murder did not end with the angel's last breath. It echoed down through the generations, lodging like a splinter in the very soul and DNA of his sons. When the Emperor finally reached Horus's sanctum, he found the War Master standing over Sanguinius's broken, bleeding body. Then came the last battle. Horus was destroyed, but the Emperor was shattered as well, cast down to the edge of death. Much about that final duel is lost to time, argued over in 1,000 retellings. Yet one detail endures across the ages. The Blood Angels hold that the Emperor could have never prevailed had Sanguinius's blade not first opened a weakness in the War Master's defenses. Because of that, they named their Primarch the greatest of them all. The Imperium survived, but it did not heal. The Emperor no longer walked at the head of his armies. His ruined body was entombed and sustained only by the life-giving machinery of the Golden Throne. The work of rebuilding and the final pursuit of the traitor remnants fell to the surviving Primarchs, chief among them Rogel Dorn and Rabute Gilliman. And it was Gilliman who reshaped the Blood Angels' future more than any other. He wrote the Codex Astartes, a doctrine meant to prevent any one commander from ever wielding the full catastrophic power of a legion again. His solution was absolute. The legions Astartes would be broken into smaller, autonomous forces of roughly 1,000 warriors. Many protested. Old loyalties were raw, grief was fresh, and suspicion was everywhere. Gilliman's decree threatened to spark another civil war. But Gilliman could not be denied. One by one, the loyalist legions relented. The legions ended. The chapters of the Astartes were born. For the Blood Angels, this was a second wound, cut into a soul already bleeding. Their father was dead, and now, with barely time to grieve or rebuild after the Siege of Terra, they were forced to divide. They had no clear leader. Worse, the first undeniable signs of their inner curse were beginning to surface. Cygnus had already awakened it in them, and Sanguinius's death, murdered under Horus's psychic assault, left a deeper scar still. The aftershock of that moment became the shadow that would be named the Black Rage. The heresy had ended. For the sons of Sanguinius, the hardest part was only beginning. From that grief, new brotherhoods rose. During the second founding, accounts vary in detail, but they agree on one point. The survivors of the Blood Angels looked to Ascalon, named as the sole surviving member of the Sanguinary Guard. And it was at his council that the Shattered Legion was divided into a small number of chapters. Each new chapter took the rites and traditions of the old Legion as the foundation of its identity. Names were chosen, command passed to proven champions, and the sons of Sanguinius separated, each now an independent force, bound by bloodline rather than a single Legion banner. Even in those earliest years, one successor's nature was already mistakable. Nasir Amit, known as the Flesh Terror, led his newly formed chapter, the Flesh Terrors, on a relentless, blood-soaked crusade to hunt down and annihilate any trace of the traitor legions. Those actions planted the roots of the reputation they would carry forever, feared, ferocious, and judged by allies and enemies alike. Over 10,000 years, more foundings followed, and more chapters were created from the Blood Angels' gene stock. Each carried Sanguinius's legacy forward, keeping the angel alive in deed, in icon, and in sacrifice. Yet as centuries turned, divergence set in. Some successors, like the angels in Carmine, built reputations of near flawless honor, mirroring the noblest image of the Legion. Others drifted so far they became almost unrecognizable. One chapter, the Carmine Blades, even passed, perhaps by accident, as descendants of the Ultramarines for a long time, until a chance meeting with Astorath the Grim in the late 41st millennium exposed the truth. At last, they had a name for the symptoms they struggled to hide: the red thirst, the black rage. Still, the bloodline endured. And then, in 998 M41, doom began to arrow toward Baal. A tendril of High Fleet Leviathan was on a direct course for the Blood Angel's home system. Word reached Baal that the Krypton Shield, the shield worlds of the Kryptis system, had collapsed in its attempt to hold the Great Devourer at bay. And as if that were not enough, a massive demonic host arrived, led by Karbanda once more, already striking Ammonai, the outermost world of the Baal system. A war on two fronts loomed: Tyranids and chaos. So Lord Commander Dante sent out a call to every Blood Angel successor, summoning the Sanguinary Brotherhood to defend their ancestral home. The Flesh Terrors answered first, deploying their entire chapter. In time, all of the Blood Angel successors answered except the Lamenters. Even the Knights of Blood came, declared excommunicate traitores centuries earlier by the High Lords of Terra, yet still believing themselves loyal to the Emperor and to Sanguinius's line. Together, they prepared for the greatest threat they had faced since the heresy. Because the Sons of Baal are never more dangerous, never more determined than when fate demands greatness of them, whether defending the Eternity Gate on Terra or standing on vitrified alien sands, they do not break. Yet, even as they fought across the Imperium, Armageddon, the Eye of Terror, the onrushing horror of Leviathan, they were stretched thinner than ever. On the shield worlds of Kryptis, Dante and his finest men met the horrors of the cryptoid tendril, a splinter of Leviathan heading straight for Baal. They prevailed, but Baal remained at risk. Dante raced through the warp to return, still many solar weeks away, when new word reached him from Astorath the Grim. A fresh chaos invasion had erupted in the Diamor system, threatened to undermine the Cadian Gate ahead of Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade. Astorath was already en route at the head of the Blood Angels' 5th Company, but more strength was needed to break the traitor assault. So Dante made the choice that defines his kind. With a heavy heart, he diverted much of his force, knowing every warrior who turned away was one fewer to defend Baal. But they were the Blood Angels. They could do no less. Dante continued toward Baal with little more than an honor guard at his side, while the rest of his warriors altered course and set their voidcraft for Diamor, carrying the legacy of Sanguinius into yet another storm. To slow the advance of the great devourer, the defenders of Baal made a choice few in the Imperium would ever know. The shield worlds of the Cryptis system were abandoned to annihilation, their populations and fortresses sacrificed to blunt the Tyranids' first momentum. It bought the sons of Sanguinius precious weeks, but it did not stop what was coming. When High Fleet Leviathan finally turned its full attention upon the Baal system, it arrived as a living night. Even after grievous losses, its vast bio-armada was so immense that the stars themselves vanished behind its bulk. Under that choking shadow, Lord Commander Dante transformed Baal and its moons into the most heavily fortified bastion in the chapter's history. Yet Dante did not wait behind walls. Strike forces were launched in every direction. Raids meant to confuse, delay, and bleed the enemy before it could strike in full strength. Hundreds of Tyranid splinter fleets were destroyed in these preemptive assaults. Every hour mattered. So Dante called for aid. His summons went out to every chapter descended from Sanguinius. The answers came swiftly. The Flesh Terrors were first to arrive, followed by nearly all of the Sanguinary Brotherhood. Still, it was not enough. High Fleet Leviathan adapted with terrifying speed. No strategy worked twice. Each successful defense taught the swarm how to break the next one. The Tyranids advanced inexorably, scouring the surrounding sector of life before descending upon Baal and its twin moons. Wave after wave fell upon the defenders. 19 major assaults, each larger than the last. All were repelled, but at an appalling cost. 5 chapter masters died in that grinding defense. 3 fell at the Dome of Angels alone. Then the Tyranids began to feed. They stripped Baal's moons bare, drinking in every scrap of biomass. Even the radiation-poisoned deserts of Baal Secundus were devoured. One by one, the outer defenses collapsed. The moons were rendered lifeless husks, and the surviving Space Marines fell back to the shattered remains of the Blood Angels' fortress monastery on Baal itself. There, they prepared to make their last stand. Doom had come at last for the sons of Sanguinius. Then the galaxy broke. With the fall of Cadia during the 13th Black Crusade, the Great Rift tore reality apart. Warp storms engulfed the Baal system, lashing it with etheric fury. No further Tyranid waves descended from the void, but the respite came too late. Not a single Imperial defender survived on Baal Prime. On Baal itself, the Tyranids already on the surface were more than sufficient to exterminate the defenders many times over. Still, Dante led his warriors onward, retreat after retreat, each one more helpless than the last. The final defensive lines shattered, and then the stars returned. The Tyranids lifted their alien senses toward the heavens, seeking the guiding will of the hive mind. It was gone. In the Tyranid fleet's place stood an Imperial fleet, blazing against the void. Rabute Gilliman had come. At the head of the Indomitus Crusade, the returned Primarch descended upon Baal like an avenging god. The war did not end in an instant. Many brutal battles followed. But at last, the Tyranid infestation was burned from the planet, and Baal was saved. In the aftermath came rebuilding of the world, of the fortress, and of the Blood Angels themselves. They were grievously diminished, but the Imperium had need of them still, for the galaxy burned on every horizon. What became of High Fleet Leviathan in those final hours remains a mystery. Yet upon the barren surface of Baal Prime, the defenders found a grim sign. Xenos skulls stacked impossibly high, arranged in the 8-pillared sigil of Ka-Banda, ancient enemy of the Blood Angels and lord of Cornate slaughter. But Guilliman did not come to Baal empty-handed. With him arrived Archmagos Belisarius Call, bearing a gift worthy of kings. From the hibernation vaults of Call's vast freighter hulk emerged hundreds of Primaris Space Marines. They wore the heraldry of the Blood Angels and their successor chapters. These warriors joined the final purging of the Tyranid remnants and restored strength to chapters on the brink of extinction. Alongside them came the technologies needed to create more of their kind. The sons of Sanguinius accepted the gift without hesitation. Commander Dante had never expected to witness the possible end of his chapter, yet he faced it without flinching. He had never expected to kneel before a living Primarch, yet he did so, with humility and gratitude. And then Guilliman placed a new burden upon him. Dante was named a regent of the Imperium Nihilus, ruler and war leader of half of the Imperium cut off by the Great Rift's shadow. In that moment, fate settled upon the Lord of Baal like unbreakable armor. The darkness ahead was deeper than any the Imperium had ever known. But with Primaris reinforcements swelling their ranks, and with renewed purpose burning in their hearts, the Blood Angels stood ready once more. Dante swore to cleanse his shattered realm of chaos, even if it took 1,000 Terran years. For it is said, among the sons of Baal, that the Lord of Angels has never stood taller than he does now, and in the deepest night, the angels of gold burn brightest. The Space Marine Legions were the Emperor's greatest creation. Transhuman warriors forged to help him conquer the galaxy and reunite humanity's scattered colonies after the Age of Strife. Among them stood the 9th Legion, the Blood Angels, who from their earliest days fought with devotion to both their Emperor and their Primarch. These legions were born from the ashes of Old Night. The Emperor had already united Terra in the brutal unification wars, but his ambitions reached far beyond a single world, or even a single star system. He sought nothing less than the reunification of all humanity, to gather every lost and sundered realm beneath a single beneficent rule. To achieve this, he required an army the galaxy had never seen before, an army bred for loyalty, hardened for unending war. Thus, the Space Marines were made. Long had the Emperor mastered the genetic arts, and in the secret laboratories beneath the Himalayan mountains, he set about his grandest work, There, he forged 20 superhuman generals, Primarchs, each designed to embody an aspect of war itself. They would stand as his sons in councils, second only to him in might. Yet before the work was complete, the ruinous power struck. The Primarchs were torn from Terra, scattered across the galaxy by the warp. Though the Emperor's protections prevented their destruction, chaos had marked them, twisting even his most perfect designs. One such child was Sanguinius. His capsule fell to Baal Secundus, a poisoned moon of the irradiated Baal system, at the place now called Angel's Fall. There, he was found by a wandering human tribe known as the Folk of Pure Blood, or simply the Blood. Chaos had touched him in the womb, gifting him with wings, fragile and vestigial at first, angelic in appearance. Some in the tribe wished to slay him as a mutant, yet compassion prevailed, and the infant was spared. Sanguinius grew swiftly in body and spirit. His soul was pure, his presence radiant, his very being a source of hope to those around him. In time, the tribes told parables and psalms of his youth, preserved by Blood Angels librarians in sacred shrines for millennia. From infancy, his growth was prodigious. After only 3 weeks, he stood as a toddler, walking and fearless. Legends say that at this age, he slew a giant fire scorpion with his bare hands. Within a single Terran year, he appeared a grown man in his prime, walking bare-skinned through Baal's irradiated deserts, excelling in every weapon, smashing rock with his hands, and soaring aloft on mighty wings. Under his guidance, his tribe prospered. When feral mutant hordes struck, he destroyed them alone, his angelic wrath terrifying to behold. In those moments of blood rage, a nimbus of light crowned his head, and his fury was unstoppable. Soon, he rose to become the leader of all pure-blood tribes, uniting them against the mutant tide that threatened their survival. In time, humanity clawed back a fragile civilization upon the wastes of Baal Secundus, guided by Sanguinius's hand. To his people, he was no longer just a savior. He was a full-on god. Though robbed of his sons, the Emperor pressed on. Using the gene material left behind, he fashioned the Space Marine legions, the armies he had always meant his Primarchs to lead. With them, he launched the Great Crusade, beginning in 798 M30, and humanity's enemies fell one after another. Aliens, tyrants, and even demons could not withstand the relentless might of the legions. As the crusade advanced, the Emperor searched for his lost sons. In 843 M30, his psychic senses led him to Baal. He arrived at the Conclave of the Blood, an amphitheater carved from Mount Seraph. where thousands gathered to hear Sanguinius speak. Clad in gold, the emperor stood among them, not as a god, but as one listener among many. Sanguinius's words lifted the hearts of his people, his voice and wings carrying them to rapture. When he soared into the air, the emperor knew this radiant being could be none other than his son. Unlike some primarchs who met their father with suspicion or defiance, Sanguinius recognized him instantly. Perhaps it was his gift of foresight, but he fell to his knees in tears, and where they struck the crimson earth, alabaster flowers bloomed in the toxic soil. The emperor bade him rise, and saw in the ball lights the nobility and strength that mirrored their leader. From that moment, the Blood Angels were born anew. The emperor took Sanguinius's warriors and implanted them with his geneseed, raising them into the 9th Legion. Together, with the Terranborn of the Legion, they marched forth under their Primarch's banner. Those left behind on Baal were tasked with guarding humanity's foothold there and ensuring future generations of aspirants carried on the Angel's legacy. To this day, the Blood Angels still recruit from Baal's moons. Sanguinius himself was the noblest of the Primarchs. His artificer armor gleamed with intricate goldwork and etchings, across which a cloak of black dappled Carnadon fur lay draped, the pelt of his first great kill, burned beside his legion at Teghar Pentaris. Upon his chest burned a jewel wrought in ruby, carved into the shape of a heart amid golden flames, symbol of his spirit and his son's devotion. Above it, 4 discs of ruby represented the Legion's birth worlds: Terra, Baal, and her twin moons. Yet more striking than any armor were his wings. Vast pinions, white as swan feathers, yet strong as the imperial Aquila, that bore him aloft in battle and in glory. Radiant, resolute, and filled with unshakable confidence, he banished doubt and fear wherever he strode. To his warriors, to his people, and even to the emperor himself, Sanguinius was the angel, beloved, eternal, and destined to inspire the Blood Angels for all time. But the Primarchs were not merely warriors. They were commanders of unmatched brilliance, leaders whose presence multiplied the strength of their Space Marine legions 100-fold. Under their direction, the Great Crusade surged forward like a tidal wave of conquest. New campaigns flared open across the galaxy, and worlds long lost to old night were reclaimed by the thousand. Through it all, the Blood Angels marched at the Emperor's side, with their Primarch Sanguinius standing ever close to his golden throne. They served as his honor guard, both shield and sword, and soon the 9th Legion's fiery nature earned them renown as devastating shock troops. Their reputation drew comparison and rivalry with the World Eaters, whose own nature was to unleash unbridled fury. Yet the Blood Angels were never as frenzied as their cousins, for Sanguinius's wisdom tempered their bloodlust, turning their fury into disciplined, surgical violence. Over decades of war, Sanguinius grew close to his brothers, among them Horus, Leman Russ, and Jagatai Khan were his kindred in spirit. In their legions, the Luna Wolves, Space Wolves, and White Scars fought alongside the Blood Angels often, forging bonds of blood and trust. Many called Sanguinius the noblest of the Primarchs, and he was ever welcome in the Emperor's inner council. Even Horus, the War Master himself, admitted, if only to himself, that there was a purity in Sanguinius that he could never equal. The angel carried a unity with their father that no other son could touch. Where other Primarchs pursued the crusade for glory or for the joy of battle, Sanguinius fought for something greater, the peace and prosperity he believed would follow. His vision mirrored the Emperor's own, a humanity united under the promise of a golden age. But that promise would never be fulfilled. As more Primarchs were discovered, the Emperor's burden grew heavier. His time was split, his focus divided. Increasingly, he turned to Horus, his most trusted son, to oversee the crusade. Horus excelled in the role, earning the loyalty of his brothers, the admiration of their legions. The high water mark of this age came at Ullanor. There, the Imperium launched a vast assault against the Orc Empire of the warlord Urlach Uruk. The final battle for Ullanor Prime was waged with overwhelming might. 100,000 Space Marines, 8 million Imperial Army troops, 100 Titans of the Legio Mortis, and 600 warships of the Armada Imperialis. Victory was absolute, and the Orc Empire shattered beyond repair. In the wake of that triumph, the Emperor elevated Horus above all others, granting him the title of Imperial War Master and command over the entirety of the Great Crusade. At the triumph at Ullanor, beneath banners of victory, the Emperor honored his chosen son. Then he departed, returning to Terra to begin a secretive labor, the construction of the Imperial Webway project. It was meant to connect the Imperium through hidden paths, free from the warp's corruption, binding humanity closer than ever before. But the Emperor revealed nothing of his purpose to his sons. His absence weighed heavily. Many of the Primarchs felt abandoned, wounded that their father had left them to continue his vision while he pursued mysteries in silence. In those doubts and resentments, the seeds of ruin were sown. When Horus was struck down and corrupted by the gods of chaos on the plague moon of Davin, the betrayal that followed shook the Imperium to its foundations. He plotted rebellion, dreaming of overthrowing the Emperor himself and seizing the throne of mankind. Thus began the Horus heresy, the darkest age of the Imperium. And in that storm of treachery and blood, the Blood Angels stood unwavering. Where so many faltered, they remained loyal, holding fast to the Emperor's side as the galaxy tore itself apart. The Horus heresy struck the Blood Angels harder and left scars deeper than upon any of the Emperor's other loyal sons. For them, the dream of the Great Crusade, the promise of unity and peace, and the Emperor's golden vision ended in tragedy more bitter than most could endure. Horus, war master of the Imperium, once the Emperor's most beloved son, turned to chaos. His betrayal was so profound that even 10 millennia later, the Imperium still bleeds from the wound. One by one, Horus bent or broke his brothers, turning them against their father, until after 9 years of war, the galaxy itself seemed aflame. At last, he hurled his traitor legions against the Imperial Palace on Terra, pitting Astartes against Astartes, brother against brother. The walls of the palace groaned under the onslaught, and the dark gods whispered triumph, for Horus had bartered away his soul for their power. Before his fall, Horus and Sanguinius were closer than any two Primarchs, fighting countless wars at one another's side. Their bond was so strong, it sparked jealousy in others. Yet Horus knew something none of their brothers did, a secret Sanguinius had carried for decades. On Melchior, during a genocidal campaign, Horus had stumbled upon Sanguinius in the depths of a ruined alien chapel, just as the angel struck down one of his own sons. Confused and horrified, Horus demanded to know why. Sanguinius confessed. Within his blood ran a flaw, a buried genetic curse, one that could one day awaken and consume both him and his legion. This curse would become known as the Red Thirst. Only a handful shared the full truth. Ascalon, First Captain Raldoron, the Master Apothecary of Baal, and a few others. Together, they labored to contain the affliction. Horus, moved by his brother's trust, swore he would never reveal the secret, not even to the Emperor. He vowed to help Sanguinius find a cure, no matter how long it took. The vow would be twisted into a weapon when Horus, corrupted by chaos, turned the knowledge of the flaw against the Blood Angels. In time, Horus found a way to exploit that curse. Masking betrayal with duty, he ordered the Ninth Legion to cleanse the Cygnus Cluster, a system of 7 worlds and 15 moons of Xenos. To Sanguinius, this was simply another crusade. In truth, it was a trap. The Cygnus Cluster was no longer a mortal realm, but a hell of demon worlds, ruled by Kyrus the Perverse, a greater demon of Slanesh. When the Blood Angels arrived, the warp itself struck out. Their navigators and astropaths were crippled or killed in this first psychic onslaught. Kyrus revealed himself in mocking grandeur, daring Sanguinius to take back the system from him. With no choice, the Blood Angels descended into battle. On Cygnus Prime, the angel led his sons through demonic hordes and screaming cultists, his wings bright amidst the storm of blood. In the Cathedral of the Mark, He confronted not Kairos, but Karbanda, the greater demon of corn, one of the blood god's most infamous champions. The monster mocked him, revealing Horus's betrayal, and the two clashed. At first, Sanguinius fought like a tempest, piercing Karbanda's chest with his blade. But the demon's whip crushed the angel's legs. His axe hurled him to the ground. In fury, Karbanda slaughtered 500 blood angels in a single sweep of his weapon. The psychic shock of their deaths broke Sanguinius's mind, casting him into unconsciousness. Driven mad with grief and fury, the sons of Baal hurled themselves into the demonic tide, destroying everything before them. They banished Kairos, shattered Karbanda's armies, and tore Cygnus Prime free of chaos. Sanguinius, though wounded, healed swiftly, as all Primarchs did. But he swore vengeance on Karbanda, and when Rogaldorn's call came for aid in Terra's defense, the angel and his legion made haste. He now understood more clearly than most the true depth of Horus's treachery. The Blood Angels sought Terra, but the warp was in chaos, the ruin storm raging. Their navigators reached instead for the brightest psychic beacon they could find, believing it to be the Astronomicon. It was not. They emerged instead in Ultramar, drawn by the light of the Pharos on Sotha. Their arrival was no accident, but guided by the beacon itself. There, amidst the shining cobalt fleets of the 13th Legion, Sanguinius was welcomed by his brother Rebute Gilliman. The angel had not reached Terra, but he had reached Sanctuary, and in the realm of Ultramar, a new chapter of the heresy awaited. The ruin storm split the Imperium in two, severing light from light. In Ultramar, the Astronomicon was lost to the Tempest, and for several Terran years, no word came of the Emperor. Rebute Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, refused to let the great work die. He proclaimed a bulwark against the dark, Imperium Secundus, a realm to continue the war against the traitors and safeguard humanity's flame. When the Blood Angels emerged from the nightmare of Cygnus and reached Ultramar by the beacon of Sotha's Pharos, Gilliman named Sanguinius rightful heir to the Emperor and Imperator Regis of this second Imperium. Soon, the Dark Angels arrived as well, likewise guided by the Pharos. Lionel Johnson was made Lord Protector, master of all the realm's armies, a title in all but name equal of War Master. The Foundation was stained at once. Conrad Kurz, the Night Haunter, had stowed away within the Dark Angel's flagship the Invincible Reason. He slipped its hold and unleashed terror across Macragge, sowing chaos for its own sake. Cornered at last, Kurz sprang a trap. Explosives brought down an entire chapel on both Gilliman and the Lion. They survived only through the sudden intervention of warsmith Barbarous Dantioch of the Loyalist Iron Warriors, who, linked by the Pharos, reached through its portal and pulled the Primarchs to safety, across the galaxy to Sotha. For 2 Terran years, the Lion hunted curs, while he and Guilliman clashed over the governance of Imperium Secundus. Security, dissent, and the rebels on Macragge, whom the Lion swore were Cur's pawns. When a suicide bombing struck an Astartes convoy, the Lion imposed martial law with the First Legion. Convinced Cur's hid within Illyrium, he argued for an orbital saturation bombardment. Sanguinius and Guilliman refused to countenance such civilian losses. The Lion loosed the Dreadwing instead. At Alma Mons, the Lion finally met Cur's in brutal combat, and he won. When he demanded to know why his brother had turned from the Emperor, Cur's answered only, "Why not?" A monster in his mind, he said, that he could not stop. Unable to kill him, the Lion broke Cur's spine across his knee and delivered the paralyzed Night Haunter to Sanguinius and Guilliman for judgment. At the Triumvirate, Cur's refused guilt. He claimed purpose, each Primarch an instrument, and he the embodiment of terror. He had only done what he was made to do. He then drove a wedge deeper, accusing the Lion of ordering orbital strikes in defiance of Guilliman's command. Rage flared. The Lion moved to kill Cur's, but Sanguinius's words stayed his hand. Guilliman, furious at the betrayal, seized the Lion sword and snapped it across his armored thigh. Sanguinius dismissed L. Johnson from the chamber and dissolved the Triumvirate. For violating the directive to spare civilians, the Lion was banished from Imperium Secundus. Within hours, the Dark Angels withdrew from Macragge. Brooding aboard the Invincible Reason, L. Johnson questioned decades of choices. As the fleet prepared to depart for Caliban, he returned to the chamber of the Tolchoka engine and ordered it to teleport him and Deathwing Lieutenant Holguin back to Macragge. Sanguinius was poised to execute Cur's when the Lion and Holguin appeared in a burst of translation. Troops rushed in. The Lion bade them stand down and spoke. Cur's foresaw his own death, he said, at the hands of an assassin sent by the Emperor. If true, the Emperor yet lived. Sanguinius recognized the weight of that claim, as he had had visions of his own, of death at Horus's hand. When Guilliman asked Cur's fate, the Lion knelt and swore to be his jailer. The Blood Angel's finest hour came in the heresy's last act, the Battle of Terra. Many loyalist legions were delayed or scattered by the traitor's designs, but Rogel Dorn and the Imperial Fists had prepared the world as best they could. Jagatai Khan and the White Scars broke through to join the defense, despite a strangely ineffectual Alpha Legion strike. The Blood Angels also made the perilous jump, one of only 2 legions to reach Terra before the full storm of the traitor host. 3 Titan legions stood with them, and close to 2 million soldiers of the Imperial Army. It was not enough. The palace shook. The Emperor could not stride the walls. Still, the Blood Angels held, shoulder to shoulder, with the Imperial Fists, Custodians, and Imperial Army, their Primarch a blazing figure in the sanctified glass of the Sanctus Praetoria Imperator. battling demons whose whispers could unmake the will of 1,000 heroes. At the Eternity Wall spaceport, they bled in their hundreds, yet held firm. And before the Eternity Gate itself, Kabanda returned to settle the debt of Cygnus. The bloodthirster hurled Sanguinius to the stones and raised a killing blow. The angel rose instead, seized demon wrist and ankle, lifted, and snapped the monster's spine across his knee. He hurled the broken behemoth back into its hoard and slammed the gate, buying the inner palace a reprieve. Still, the fall of Terra seemed inevitable. In triumph, Horus grew careless. From the bridge of the vengeful spirit, he lowered his psychic wards and void shields, daring the Emperor to come. The trap was laid. The Emperor sprang it. He teleported aboard with Sanguinius, Rogel Dorn, custodians, fists, and blood angels at his side. Sanguinius had long foreseen his fate, and yet he went without hesitation. The demon-racked corridors parted them. Alone, legends say, Sanguinius was brought before Horus. The arch-traitor offered him one chance to renounce the Emperor and join Chaos's victory. The angel refused. Wounded from the gate, battered by war, he attacked anyway. But he could not prevail. Horus, swollen with the power of all 4 dark gods, slew him with malice so profound its psychic echo burned through space and time, searing itself into the souls of every blood angel yet to be born. That sacrifice bought a heartbeat. When the Emperor reached the sanctum, he found Horus above Sanguinius's broken body. What followed is told 100 ways, but one truth endures. The Emperor could not have felled Horus had Sanguinius's blade not first made a breach in the War Master's armor. The Emperor triumphed, but was mortally wounded. The echo of the angel's torment endures. Across 10 millennia his sons still hear it, still see the last moments of his life. And in that moment, in that vision, are driven to madness and fury. Thus the blood angels came to bear their twin blood curses, the red thirst and the black rage. The galaxy was forever changed in the wake of Horus's defeat. The Emperor of mankind, once the towering champion of humanity, would never again stride to war. His broken form was interred upon the golden throne, sustained only by the life-giving machinery that now kept him from death. From that moment on, the burden of rebuilding the Imperium and driving back the last remnants of the traitor legions fell to his surviving sons, Primarchs such as Rogel Dorn and Rebute Gilliman. It was Gilliman whose hand would leave the greatest mark upon the Blood Angels in the years that followed. From his mind came the Codex Astartes, the great treatise that restructured the Space Marines forever. Gilliman decreed that never again should any one man hold command of an entire legion, for no mortal or even Primarch could be trusted with such devastating power. To ensure this, he demanded the legions be broken into smaller chapters of no more than 100,000 each an autonomous brotherhood. The edict struck like a blade through the legions. Many Primarchs rallied against it, seeing insult and distrust in Guilliman's decree. In that raw and dangerous time, when every wound was still fresh and suspicion lay heavy upon all, the Codex threatened to ignite another civil war. But Guilliman's will could not be denied. One by one, the Loyalist legions bent to his vision, and the age of the great legions ended. In their place rose the chapters of the Adeptus Astartes. For the Blood Angels, this was a cruel double wound. They had already lost their father, Sanguinius, to Horus's hand upon the vengeful spirit. Now, before they could grieve or replenish their terrible losses at Terra, their brotherhood was to be sundered. Worse still, within their ranks the first stirrings of the flaw were awakened. The horrors of Cygnus Prime and the demons of Khorne and Slanesh had left deep scars upon their bodies and souls. When Sanguinius fell at Horus's hand, the psychic echo of his death reverberated through every one of his sons, branding them with a curse that could never be undone. From that moment, the red thirst stirred restlessly within them, and the black rage, visions of their Primarch's final sacrifice, tore at their minds. Though the heresy had ended, for the Blood Angels, their greatest trial had only just begun. Yet, even in grief, they'd endure. In the second founding, the shattered Ninth Legion was gathered beneath the council of Ascalon, the last survivor of the Sanguinary Guard. Accounts differ in detail, but all agree that it was Ascalon's wisdom that guided the sons of Sanguinius through this dark hour. Under his guidance, the survivors of the Legion were divided into a smaller number of chapters, each led by a champion of the Blood Angels. The successors carried forth the traditions and rites of the Ninth Legion, reshaped into new brotherhoods that bore fitting names. Among them was Nasir Amit, the vengeful warrior known as the Flesh Terror. As chapter master of his newly formed brotherhood, Amit hurled his warriors into a blood-soaked crusade against the traitor remnants. Even in those first years, their relentless savagery carved out a reputation that would define and haunt the Flesh Terrors ever after. When the Loyalists withdrew from Horus's dying flagship, they bore with them the body of Sanguinius. His sons carried him back to Baal, and there, beneath their grand chapel, they raised a tomb. Angelic effigies towered above its gates, eternal guardians watching over the great angel in death as in life. Nearly 10 millennia had passed since that day, yet Sanguinius remains one of the most venerated figures of the Imperium. His sacrifice, which brought the Emperor the chance to defeat the arch-traitor, made him a saint in all but name. The common citizenry revere him as humanity's angelic protector, and chapels to Sanguinius stand beside the temples of the Emperor himself. His name is celebrated in the feast of the Sanguinala, when adepts across the Imperium wear the red badge of the angel upon their breast, in solemn remembrance of his sacrifice. But for all the reverence, the sons of Sanguinius carry a darker legacy. To this day, the Blood Angels and their successors are both feared and mistrusted, haunted by the horror of ancient events, and driven by a secret thirst that cannot be quenched and must never be revealed. Before we descend into the dust-choked valleys of Baal, or stand upon its broken battlements and watch the sky burn, we must understand what this battle truly was. This was more than just another pesky Tyranid splinter fleet harassing some fringe world. It was an extinction-level event. In the final hours of the 41st millennium, the single greatest concentration of Hive Fleet Leviathan ever encountered by humanity turned its endless hunger toward Baal, the irradiated cradle of the Blood Angels, sons of the angelic Primarch Sanguinius, a chapter forged in nobility and tragedy, a brotherhood haunted by ancient curses, and now the chosen prey of the great devourer. What followed would be known as the Devastation of Baal, a cataclysm fought in the shadow of the Third Tyrannic War. And while the defenders of Baal endured solar weeks of relentless slaughter, the eruption of the Great Rift twisted the flow of existence. To Terra, the conflict may have stretched across standard years. To those fighting upon Baal's sands, it was an unbroken storm of blood and fire. And in that storm, something impossible happened. As Hive Fleet Leviathan descended in numbers beyond comprehension, as bioships eclipsed the heavens and the shadow in the warp smothered all hope of rescue, another force intervened. At the very moment the Great Rift tore open and the galaxy screamed, demonic legions spilled forth upon Baal Prime. At their head strode Ka-Banda, the bloodthirster who had once nearly damned the Blood Angels during the Cygnus campaign, the architect of their most feared affliction, an ancient enemy whose hatred burned hotter than the sun that scorched Baal's deserts. But he did not come to save them. He came to claim them, and he would not allow the Tyranids to steal that prize. Thus, in a nightmarish convergence, three apocalypses collided upon one doomed system: the endless hunger of Leviathan, the fury of Khorne's legions, and the defiance of the sons of Sanguinius. While the Blood Angels and their successor chapters, the Sanguinary Brotherhood, fought and bled across Baal and its moons, it was the demons who tore through the largest concentration of Tyranid vessels in orbit, dragging bioships into warp rifts and leaving only burning carcasses to rain upon the planet below. But when the madness ended, Baal still stood. Baal Prime bore a scar that would never fade. A mountain range of Tyranid skulls shaped into the 8-pillared sigil of Khorne, dominating its southern hemisphere. But in the aftermath, amid ruin and radioactive ash, a new era dawned for humanity in the Imperium. Rebute Gilliman, resurrected Primarch, Lord Commander of the Imperium, and architect of the Indomitus Crusade, recognized in Commander Dante something unbroken, a flame carried from the Imperium's forgotten greatness. And so Dante, chapter master of the Blood Angels, was named Lord Regent of Imperium Nihilus, ruler and guardian of half of the galaxy cut off from Terra by the Great Rift's darkness. Baal would rebuild. The Blood Angels would rise once more. And from the ashes of near extermination, they would march into the Dark Imperium, not as victims of an apocalypse, but as its heroes. This is the story of how they endured the impossible. This is the devastation of Baal. In the dying years of the 41st millennium, a shadow greater than any before it fell across the stars. It began with silence. Then came the reports. Scattered, desperate, half lost in static. The Cryptis system, long fortified as the bastion that guarded the approaches to Baal, had fallen. The so-called Krypton Shield, a bulwark designed to blunt the advance of High Fleet Leviathan, was shattered. And behind that breach, something vast was moving. Commander Dante of the Blood Angels had already sensed this gathering storm. Strike forces had been dispatched across the Red Star, harrying splinter fleets in precise and surgical assaults. They struck like crimson comets, vanishing before the Tyranids could properly react. But even as these hit-and-run wars raged in distant systems, Dante knew the truth, that the swarm was coming to his home. Leviathan was adapting, learning, refining its approach with terrifying speed. Every engagement fed the hive mind new data. Every sacrifice revealed another weakness to exploit. And so Dante made his choice. He would not wait for annihilation to arrive on Baal's doorstep. At the head of a formidable strike force, the first and second companies of the Blood Angels, Brother Corbulo, Captain Carleon, Chief Librarian Mephiston, and the brutal warriors of Gabriel Seth's Flesh Terrors, Dante launched what would become known as the Cryptis Campaign. They arrived to find the system already drowning. Imperial defenders fought on in pockets of ruin, overwhelmed but unbroken. The Blood Angels struck with righteous fury, carving through bio-horrors in orbit and on the ground alike. Yet, for every beast slain, 100 took its place. The war escalated into something apocalyptic. Casualties mounted on both sides. Worlds burned. Oceans boiled beneath falling spores. At last, faced with an enemy tide that could not be held by conventional means, Dante sanctioned the unthinkable. An ancient device of Necrontyr origin, the Magnovitrium, was unleashed. A world died in cold, silent obliteration. Its shattered remains were hurled outward in a storm of planetary debris, smashing through the advancing splinter fleet and tearing vast rents into the Tyranid formation. It was a devastating blow, enough so to stagger Leviathan's momentum, but not enough to end it. Dante did not delude himself. The swarm had been slowed. It had not been stopped. And so, he issued the order to return to Baal. For if the Blood Angels were to perish, they would do so upon the soil of their birth. By the opening days of 999 M41, Baal had transformed into a fortress world. Upon Baal Prime and Baal Secundus, slab-like redoubts rose from the irradiated deserts. Minefields choked the valleys. Gun batteries were sighted across every viable landing zone. Even the Arx Angelicum, the fortress monastery of the Blood Angels, bristled with additional layers of fortification. Then the call was answered. From across the galaxy, the sons of Sanguinius came home. Flesh terrors, blood drinkers, carmine blades, angels in carmine, and more besides. The sanguinary brotherhood assembled in numbers unseen since the darkest days of the Imperium. Entire fleets gathered in orbit. Battle barges and strike cruisers whose combined firepower could scour planets clean. Yet, when the Auspex arrays ignited in crimson warning sigils, hope faltered. A biofleet stretched across 10,000 kilometers of void. It moved not as scattered vessels, but as a single writhing organism of chitin and hunger. And still, it advanced. As Leviathan closed in, Dante sanctioned acts once deemed heretical by tradition. The chapter's geneseed, its sacred inheritance, was removed from its crypts and dispatched aboard a swift vessel under heavy guard. If Baal fell, the Blood Angels would not vanish from history. At the same time, every viable youth from the nomadic tribes of Baal Prime and Secundus was gathered. 40,000 wide-eyed aspirants were armed and stationed within the Arx Angelicum's defensive lines. They were told that survival would earn them the right to join the chapter. Few would live to claim that honor. The remaining tribespeople were left with what little weaponry could be spared. Some chose to fight. Most were simply consumed. And above it all, the Void War began. Dante refused to yield space uncontested. The Blood Angels' fleets surged forward to meet Leviathan head-on. Across 100 battlefronts in the void, red armored vessels unleashed fury into the bioships of the swarm. Lance batteries speared through living hulls. Nuclear nuclear warheads blossomed in silent detonations. Ruptured tyrannid organisms vented ichor into the vacuum, their carcasses tumbling into darkness. It was glorious, but it was futile. One by one, battle barges were isolated. Cruisers were engulfed by swarms of lesser bioships. Organic missiles battered void shields into collapse. The Tyranids absorbed losses without hesitation, replacing them with obscene abundance. Eventually, the surviving Imperial ships were forced to withdraw, striking at the fleet's flanks in desperate harassment actions. And then, the sky above Baal darkened. Mycetic spores fell in the millions, and with them came the shadow and the warp, a suffocating psychic pall that strangled astropathic cries for aid. The sons of Sanguinius stood alone. The first of the Tyranid waves were annihilated. Pre-sighted artillery reduced entire broods to vapor before they could even begin to advance. Bolter fire scythed through charging gaunts. Dozens of bioships were destroyed in low orbit. But the 10th wave did not break, nor the 11th. Soon, the desert sands were hidden beneath a living carpet of chitin. Towering above the masses strode hive tyrants and monstrous tervagons, spawning fresh horrors into the fray. Gene stealers poured through breaches in the defensive lines, dragging space marines into brutal hand-to-hand slaughter. And watching from behind the carnage stood a singular intelligence reborn. The Swarm Lord, spawned anew to orchestrate Baal's extinction. Under the Swarm Lord's direction, the Tyranids adapted with chilling precision, countering tactics almost as soon as they were revealed. Still, the Blood Angels fought. At Angel's Fall, aspirants died in their thousands as the settlement drowned in claw and talon. Gabriel Seth and the Flesh Terrors launched savage counterattacks, carving through swarms and rivers of alien blood. Their fury bought time, but at a terrible cost. On Baal Secundus, the Carmine Blades defended the astropathic relay with immovable resolve, bolters roaring day after day, in the vain hope that someone, somewhere, might just hear their call. On Baal Prime, the situation was worse still. For weeks, the defenders repelled wave after wave. 19 major assaults hurled back through sheer will and firepower. Blood Drinkers stood back to back with Angels and Carmine. Assault Marines hurled themselves into the largest biomonstrosities. Armored spearheads of Adeptus Astartes tanks clashed against stampeding carnifexes in grinding cataclysms of metal and flesh. The Tyranid dead rose in mountains. Hundreds fell for every space marine slain. Yet slain they were. Defensive lines buckled. Strongholds were overrun. 5 chapter masters of the Sanguinary Brotherhood gave their lives in the struggle. Heroism alone could not halt extinction. And at last, the truth stood staring at them. Undeniable. Baal was dying. And unless a miracle came, the noble lineage of Sanguinius would end not in glory, but in the devouring dark. Just as Baal stood upon the brink of extinction, the heavens themselves split open. Across the breadth of the galaxy, a wound tore through reality. A cataclysm of raw empiric force that would come to be known as the Great Rift. Warp energy surged like a tidal wave unbound. The skies above Baal ignited in unnatural flame, streaked with screaming auroras of etheric fire. The immaterium boiled close to the skin of the material realm. An ancient predator stirred within its depths. Then, the veil ruptured. On Baal Prime, where the fighting was already at its most savage, reality cracked like glass struck by a hammer. The air filled with the stench of brimstone and fresh spilled blood. From the widening wound in the sky poured legions of demons, their howls rising in exultant praise to Khorne, the blood god. At their head descended a nightmare long etched into the Blood Angel's most dark memories. Ka'banda, a bloodthirster of towering stature, bat-winged and immense, wielding a rune-etched axe in one claw and a barbed whip in the other. No creature was more reviled by the sons of Sanguinius. During the ancient Cygnus campaign, it had fanned the embers of their genetic curse, the Red Thirst, into an inferno that would haunt them until the end of time. Ka'banda had returned for one purpose. The Blood Angels were his prey. He would not allow the Tyranids to steal his triumph. The demon legions fell upon Baal Prime without discrimination. Bloodletters clashed with Tyranid warriors in a storm of claw and hellblade. Brazen-hooved blood crushers thundered across fields already soaked in ichor, crushing termagants beneath their charge. Warp-spawned monstrosities tore through both Xenos and Astartes alike. It was slaughter without reason or allegiance. Ka-Banda himself strode through the carnage like an executioner in a charnel house, his axe rising and falling in arcs that felled carnifexes and space marines with equal contempt. Caught between swarm and demon, the defenders reeled. Chapter Master Gabriel Seth of the Flesh Terrors led a fighting withdrawal, his warriors pressed from all sides by enemies both alien and infernal. It was then that the Knights of Blood, long excommunicated, yet still counted among the sons of Sanguinius, made their stand. Accepted as allies by Dante despite their cursed reputation, they now chose redemption in annihilation. As Seth's surviving forces fell back to their ships, the Knights of Blood hurled themselves into the thick of battle, fully consumed by the Black Rage. Their final sight was of those doomed warriors vanishing beneath a tide of demon and tyrannid alike, roaring Sanguinius's name as they were swallowed by madness and death. Baal Prime was lost. Above the burning world, the warp raged unchecked. Coils of empiric lightning lashed through the void, seizing tyrannid bioships and dragging them screaming into the immaterium. Rifts yawned open and swallowed entire clusters of hive ships whole. Others were torn apart and left as flaming carcasses, drawn down by Baal's gravity to rain fire upon the planets below. The Great Rift had not come as salvation for the beleaguered forces of Blood Angels, but it was devastation for Leviathan. Below the burning firmament, Commander Dante led what remained of his warriors in a measured retreat toward the Arx Angelicum. Time itself seemed to fracture beneath the warp's influence. The carnage felt endless, perhaps hours, perhaps days, perhaps years measured differently against the wider galaxy. The shadow and the warp battled against empiric madness. Tyrannids and space marines fought on through a reality grown unstable and half unmade. And then came the final assault. The greatest tyrannid wave yet crashed against the fortress monastery's walls. Defenses that had held through 19 prior assaults finally buckled. Within the dome of angels alone, 3 more successor chapter masters fell in defiance, their blood mingling with the alien ichor pooling across the shattered marble. Bodies mounted in grotesque heaps. And still, the sons of Sanguinius fought on. In a final act of defiance, the gates of the Tower Amareo were opened. The Death Company, those lost to the Black Rage, were unleashed upon the swarm. If the Blood Angels were to perish, It would be with chains unbroken and blades red. And then the Swarm Lord entered the breach. The hive mind's supreme avatar cut through Astartes' ranks with its twin bone swords, each stroke precise and merciless. Exhausted beyond mortal limits, grief-stricken yet unbowed, Dante forced his way towards it, axe mortalis in hand. Beneath a sky aflame with warp light, they met. Steel and chitin clashed in a duel of extinction, of finality. Dante suffered wound upon mortal wound. His armor shattered, his lifeblood soaking the dust of Baal. But in the end, with a final, desperate stroke, Dante struck the Swarm Lord down. The great beast fell, and Dante collapsed beside it. As blood angels struggled to reach their fallen commander, the sky changed once again. The warp storm receded. The rifts closed. And where once the heavens had been clogged with tyrannid bioships, there was nothing. Not a single biovessel remained. In their place hung the proud silhouettes of Imperial warships. At their head stood the flagship of Rabute Gilliman, the avenging sun, leading the Indomitus crusade. Salvation had finally arrived. Drop pods and storm raven gunships screamed down through Baal's atmosphere, bearing warriors unlike any seen before. The Primaris Space Marines. Forged in secret upon Mars by Archmagos Dominus Belisarius' call, these new transhuman soldiers entered the fray with disciplined precision. Mark II call pattern bolt rifles barked in flawless volleys, cutting down disoriented gaunts and warriors alike. With the Swarm Lord slain, and their fleet annihilated by the warp's fury, the tyrannid ground forces faltered. Deprived of synaptic command, Hormagaunts and Termagaunts reverted to their feral instinct. The Primaris and the surviving sons of Sanguinius pressed upon this advantage. The cleansing of Baal and Baal Secundus was brutal and costly, but within a solar month, the swarm was broken. Baal Prime required no such reclamation. It was lifeless, scoured utterly clean. Dante, gravely wounded yet alive, bent the knee before Gilliman, now Lord Commander of the Imperium and the Imperial Regent. In the shattered remnants of the Blood Angels and their successors, Gilliman saw something rare. A flame from the Imperium's golden age, still flickering despite impossible odds. Guilliman's gift was immense. Reinforcements of Primaris Space Marines drawn from the geneseed of Sanguinius himself. If the Primarch learned of certain dark truths within that bloodline, he spoke no word of it. Though Leviathan's fleet had vanished without a trace, the Great Rift left its own scar. Upon Baal Prime's southern hemisphere rose mountains of Tyranid skulls, arranged in vast ziggurats. Together, they formed the 8-pillared sigil of Khorne, Ka'banda's final insult. The demons had withdrawn into the warp as suddenly as they had come, but the message remained. By Dante's order, orbital bombardment erased the blasphemous symbol from the moon's surface. But still, its memory lingered. In the months that followed, the Blood Angels began the long work of rebuilding. Their geneseed stocks were returned to the vaults of the Arx Angelicum. The several thousand aspirants who had survived the siege were inducted into the chapter. Those who endured the transformation swelled newly expanded scout companies, authorized by Dante for both the Blood Angels and the Sanguinary Brotherhood. The Arch Mechanicus, Czar Quasitor, delivered further reinforcements. Primaris warriors were awakened from stasis vaults, and Baal itself became a site of new creation under Call's Mechanicus artisans. Among those tasked with purging the final Tyranid remnants on Baal Secundus was Sergeant Carleon of the 8th Company. During the long hunt through radioactive wastes and shattered settlements, he assessed the newly integrated Primaris brethren fighting at his side. His leadership in that campaign earned him promotion to lieutenant. And, above it all, Guilliman bestowed upon Dante a grave responsibility. Commander Dante was declared Lord Regent of the Imperium Nihilus, the dark half of the galaxy cut off by the Great Rift. The devastation of Baal had ended, but the Imperium's war had only grown more desperate. The sons of Sanguinius had survived extinction. Now, they would carry that survival into a galaxy torn in two. A galaxy that burned brighter and darker than ever before. Across the countless worlds of the Imperium, the Adeptus Astartes are often spoken of as myths. For most, the name Space Marine is only known through hushed tales, old litanies, or the terror of war. When a planet burns, be it by invasion or rebellion, it is then, and only then, that the angels of death descend. Through these moments of fire and blood, legends are born, and some names echo louder than the others, whispered from one dark corner of the galaxy to another. names wrapped in reverence. One name in particular has traveled far: Dante, the Lord of Angels, the bringer of light, the bane of demons. Dante, Lord Commander of the Blood Angels, leads his chapter in what many call the swan song of the Imperium. Clad in sacred gold, he embodies the nobility of Sanguinius, even as he shoulders the quiet tragedies known only to his kin. Behind his golden mask lies not only a warrior, but the weight of history. He is, by many accounts, the oldest living space marine of the era Indomitus. For more than 1,000 years, he has served as chapter master. Centuries more as a warrior before that. Even Captain Lysander of the Imperial Fists, lost in the warp for 1,000 years, cannot recall a time when Dante was not master of the Blood Angels. His record of triumphs is longer than the total honor rolls of entire chapters. And yet, the truth of his legend, like all Imperial heroes, is laced with myth. Fact and fable blur in the Imperium. Perhaps Dante allows this, knowing the end times demand belief as much as strength. Or perhaps he simply does not care. He is here to defend the Imperium, not to worry how the ages will remember him. Long ago, on Baal's second moon, a boy named Louis was born to a man called Arias. He grew up in the harsh salt wastes, a land of radiation, hunger, and mutant beasts. At the age of 7, his mother died, and soon after, he left his father behind and set out to become one of the Emperor's angels. Like many born to the salt wastes, Louis was small, stunted by hunger and a toxic sun. No one from his wandering tribe had ever survived the journey to Angel's Fall, the Blood Angels' place of selection. Yet Louis tried. He nearly died of thirst, but in the haze of his suffering, he saw a golden winged figure, and with it, water. It was the first time the Sanguinius came to him. When he finally reached the place of choosing, Louis was not the strongest nor the fastest, but he endured. Of the 500 boys gathered, Louis passed each trial through sheer resolve. In the final trial, where he was to kill a fellow aspirant, he refused. His mercy sealed his place in the chapter. Taken to Baal itself, Louis faced the winnowing of weariness, 3 days without sleep. On the final day, nearly lost to exhaustion, the Sanguinius appeared again. He endured. He drank from the sanguinary chalice and fell into the sacred year-long slumber that transformed mortals into angels. Yet his sleep was anything but peaceful. Louis cried out in his dreams, screaming names of ancient gods, fallen primarchs, and demons. His agony shook the very sarcophagus in which he lay. None had ever thrashed so violently and lived. When he finally awoke, reborn, the marks of his clawed struggle still lined the lid of his tomb. Lewis was gone, and Dante stood in his place. The truth known only to the Blood Angels and their sanguinary kin is that Dante was never meant to lead. He was but a line officer, one among many. But fate, brutal and bloody fate, chose otherwise. In the closing years of the 37th millennium, the Blood Angels were broken. The Black Legion had ravaged them during the Ghost War on Machen. Though they rebuilt, the wound lingered. Centuries later, the Callius insurrection struck. 9 in every 10 Space Marines were lost. Nearly the entire chapter council perished. In the thick of war, Brother Captain Dante led his 5th company in defense of the Angels Numinous. But the heresy ran deeper than expected, and soon the Blood Angels were caught in a sprawling web of trench warfare. As they gathered to withdraw, a traitor fleet emerged from the warp. The Void War lasted 3 days. Dante's warriors boarded and destroyed 7 Chaos capital ships. And when the fires dimmed, only 200 Blood Angels remained. Among them, Dante was the last captain alive. The chapter's priests and chaplains met in solemn council. They chose Dante to be their new master. Thus began his rule, shaped not by triumph, but by survival. Since that day, Dante has become legend. While Logan Grimnar of the Space Wolves is beloved, and Marnius Calgar of the Ultramarines respected, Dante is something else, a living myth. A golden warrior who descends from the skies in fire, who ends rebellions with a single blow, the bringer of light. Some say his axe has felled more demon lords than any other living soul. At the gates of Pandemonium, it was Dante who banished the bloodthirster Scarbrand. On Terion, he faced the Night Lords and the Brothers of Darkness. Today, a marble colossus of him watches over Terion's capital, arms stretched out in eternal mercy. He has fought from Ultima Macaria to Jonol, leading countless campaigns. No other man has walked so many of the Imperium's million worlds, always at the forefront of war. His most famed victory remains the Second War for Armageddon. He saved Acheron Hive from the Orcs, captured the traitorous governor Hermann von Straub, and turned the tide of the war. Without Dante, the planet might have been lost. Even now, a monitoring station in the system bears his name. Though too far to return for the third war for Armageddon, Dante sent Captain Tycho and the Third Company in his stead. He has endured dark years, held the chapter together in secret wars, burned heretic fleets with fire and faith, seized forbidden relics so no heretic could rise again. To fellow chapter masters, he is an exemplar. To the generals of the Imperial Guard, a beacon. To the people of the Imperium, he is more than a warrior. He is Dante, a savior in golden armor, descending on wings of flame. He wears the face of a god, the golden death mask of Sanguinius. In every war zone, on every battlefield touched by the shadow of the end times, he leads from the front. Dante, bringer of light, Lord Commander of the Blood Angels, spear tip of the Emperor's wrath. In battle, he is never far from his sanguinary guard. Those golden-armored praetorians who have forsaken their own ambition to remain forever at his side. Each has served him for centuries. Each is a weapon in his hand, as much as the axe mortalis and his perdition pistol. And though it is rare when Dante goes to war without them, he leads with equal humility, whether it be a captain's honor guard or a sergeant's support squad. For those chosen to serve beside the Lord Commander, the honor is eternal, often etched into their armor in silent reverence. For over a millennium, Dante has cleansed subsectors, destroyed traitor chapters, and stood firm against the doom that creeps ever closer. To the Imperium he is flawless, an unmoving golden symbol of angelic vengeance. But the truth lies beneath the mask. His face, though still handsome with the echoes of his Primarch's perfection, is worn and weary. White-haired, marble-eyed, and tired beyond measure, Dante has grown very old, and he knows it. The Blood Angels are a soulful breed, and none more so than their master. Behind his pale gaze is no illusion of triumph. He sees a galaxy consumed by war. Xenos, heretics, and horrors uncounted spill into mankind's cradle. There will be no final victory, but there can be survival. And as long as Dante draws breath, humanity's light will not flicker out. When the Lord of Angels goes to war, he does so clad in relics of such reverence and power that his very presence becomes a beacon of hope to the faithful and a nightmare given form to the traitor. His golden artifice armor, resplendent and radiant, is said to resemble a living flame of glory as he soars across the battlefield. In the aftermath of the devastation of Baal, when Commander Dante crossed the Rubicon Primaris and was reborn in a mightier form, this armor would be reforged to accommodate his enlarged flame. An enhanced variant of the revered Mark X power armor, tailored to a legend. Strapped to his back is a jump pack, a vectored thrust promethium engine capable of hurtling a warrior across the field like a blazing comet. Originally designed for the elite of the Adeptus Astartes, Dante's was remade after his ascension to the Primaris ranks, now mirroring those used by the newest generation of Space Marines. With it, he strikes where the foe least expects, descending like divine judgment and golden fury. Upon his face, he wears the death mask of Sanguinius, a sacred relic sculpted in the image of the Blood Angel's fallen Primarch. The mask radiates the immortal fury of Sanguinius, echoing his anguish and wrath at Horus's betrayal. In battle, it comes alive, its ghostly energy swirling like a halo of vengeance. Its stare so charged with righteous hatred that lesser foes are driven to panic or flight. When Dante roars a battle cry, the mask roars with him, and never, save within the Blood Angel's own fortress monastery, has he removed it. Hovering above his head, affixed to his armor, is the iron halo, an ancient symbol of valor and an arcane device of protection. Its halo-shaped ring is not just ceremonial. It generates a potent force field, akin to the chaplain's Rosarius, shielding him from deadly strikes with forgotten conversion field technology. In his hands, Dante carries weapons worthy of his legend. The Perdition Pistol, an infernal relic crafted with long-lost knowledge, belches fire and ruin upon those it targets. A unique Infernus pistol, its wrath is permitted only to one of Dante's loyalty and renown. And, in his other hand, the Axe Mortalis, forged by the master artificer Matriculus in the immediate aftermath of the Horus heresy. The axe was born of grief and vengeance. With a skull-wrought haft said to carry the death curse of Sanguinius, the weapon cleaves through ceramite and plasteel as though through silk. It is the ritual weapon of the Blood Angel's chapter master, and under Dante's hand, it has slain uncounted heretics in the Emperor's name. And he would need every ounce of this sacred armory, every flame, every oath-bound relic, and every breath of divine fury, to face what waited for him beyond the stars. For the Leviathan had come, and with it, a vast enough hunger to consume Baal itself. And the Leviathan came like a living tide. After sacrificing the shield worlds of the Cryptus system to stall the enemy, Dante prepared the Baal system for the full weight of Hive Fleet Leviathan. Its mass was so vast, its approach blotted out the stars. And yet Dante did not wait for the storm to break. He struck first. Dozens of strike forces were unleashed. Ambushes, diversions, and precision raids that shattered hundreds of splinter fleets. His call for aid echoed through the stars, and the sons of Sanguinius answered. All successor chapters, save the Lamenters, came. Even the Knights of Blood, excommunicated by Terra itself, returned to Baal. But it was not enough. The Tyranids had adapted. They always do. Wave after wave, larger and more cunning than the last, descended. Entire sectors were stripped of life. Baal Secundus turned to dust. 5 chapter masters fell. 3 at the Dome of Angels alone. With the moons overrun, the remaining warriors fell back to the ruined fortress monastery of the Blood Angels. There, among shattered halls and crumbling statues, they prepared to die. But just as the final wave surged down, the galaxy tore itself apart. The great rift had opened. Baal was drowned in warp storms. When the skies cleared, the Tyranids looked to the void for command and found nothing. Their high fleet was gone. In its place, an imperial armada. At its heart flew an ancient power reborn. Rabute Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, had returned. The Indomitus Crusade swept in and purged the surviving Xenos. Baal, though wounded, was reclaimed. What happened to the Leviathan remains a mystery. Only one clue was left behind, on the now barren Baal Prime. Alien skulls were piled high in the symbol of 8, a mark of Kabanda, the demonic foe of the Blood Angels since time immemorial. The rebuilding began. Geneseed was returned to the Arx Angelicum. Survivors from the siege, grizzled aspirants hardened by fire, were inducted. Scout companies swelled. Then came the Primaris, brought by Belisarius' call. Thousands, awoken from stasis or born anew in the Mechanicus forges on Baal, stood ready to reinforce the Blood Angels and their kin. When Gilliman named Dante Lord Regent of the Imperium Nihilus, the Lord of Baal stood taller than ever, and the sons of Sanguinius, reborn in fire and blood, returned to war once more. And yet, even still, Dante is tired and far older than any space marine should be. A burden that grows heavier with each passing year. And yet one thing keeps him moving forward. A prophecy. Long ago, Sanguinius foresaw a final battle, one that would dwarf all others. A golden warrior would stand between the Emperor and his death. Most believe this referred to the siege of Terra, when the angelic Primarch fell to Horus. Dante believes otherwise. Somewhere in the future, perhaps soon, the Emperor, trapped upon his throne, may yet face oblivion. And if that hour comes, Dante knows it will be him who must stand in that place. He has prepared for it all his life. He did not expect to witness his chapter's doom, but he stood firm. He did not expect a Primarch's return, but he bowed in humbled awe. Now, as Lord Regent, he carries the weight of a galaxy's failing light on his shoulders. With the rift yawning wide and chaos pouring forth, he leads from the front, his fury undimmed. The Primaris bring new hope, Perhaps the blood angels will not burn out after all. Among his sons, it is said Dante has never stood prouder. He shines brightest now, the golden angel in the dark. He is sworn to purge the Imperium Nihilus, no matter how long it takes. Another 1,000 years, another 1,000 wars. After all, it is in the blackest night that the angel burns brightest. And with his new rank came authority. Authority Dante wielded not to rest, but to strike. He launched a bold counteroffensive across the Red Scar, seeking to reclaim territory devoured by Leviathan. The campaign became known as the Angel's Halo. And then quietly, resolutely, he made a decision. Commander Dante stepped into the crucible of transformation. He underwent the painful, life-threatening surgery known as the Rubicon Primaris, crossing the threshold into a new age of war. He rose again, stronger, taller, faster, but still himself. Still Dante.